Hey guys, I hate to start out on a real bummer, but if you haven't heard, Northern and Southern California were heavily affected by the wildfires. Up north, the Camp Fire was the most destructive fire in California history, and down here in Southern California was the Woolsey Fire. Over 80 lives were lost between the two fires, and over 20,000 structures were destroyed. Although the fires are now contained, so many need your help. Please take a moment to go to charitynavigator.org to find a charity that you prefer to donate to. I am not endorsed by any charity or charitynavigator.org. I'm just asking you to find it in your heart to help those affected. My family and I were extremely lucky to have our homes to return to, including my office where my studio is located. It's a privilege that so many don't have today. So once again, please head over to charitynavigator.org or any of the charities out there to donate to those in need. And now here's part 1 of 2 with father and son, Marty and Matt of MSDS Inc. Enjoy.
My name is Marty. For most of my good close friends and customers, just kind of an automotive hobbyist that came up through drag racing into road racing, then some graphic art school, polishing of some of my art skills, and then a lot of hobbying, a lot of tinkering on race cars, and then just finally getting into the mainstream with products that I designed and offered to sell, and coming up now in 40-something years in business, supplying major warehouses and still fulfilling a lot of enthusiasts at the retail level.
My name is Matt Schneider, Marty's son, and grew up as a car enthusiast through him and my friends collectively. Growing up in Hollywood, the car scene was always evolving, currently to this day, and it's just been a pleasure to be in this culture as a little kid to as a young adult, and going forward, it's just been a lifestyle.
Yeah, after getting through getting the learner's permit, the driver's license, and driving all mom and pop's cars. Worked some small jobs, markets and stuff, gas stations, picked up some coin, and bought myself a 69 Super Sport Camaro upon graduating high school. And within 3 days, I had the thing apart in the garage and modifying it. We had a drag strip in Long Beach called Lions Drag Strip. It was an AHRA raceway. In the old days, it was American Hot Rodding Association versus the NHRA, the National Hot Rodding Association, which actually acquired the AHRA and just turned it all into NHRA. But it was a Sunday track for $25. You drive your car down there nice and slow because it was highly whining on the freeway at about 4,500 RPM at 60 miles an hour with the gearing. You would take it to the track, and for $25 for the whole Sunday, you just had a ball. Most of my friends that followed us through life in the old auto shop in high school, we all had everything: Dodges, Mustangs, Plymouths, Chevys, everything, you name it. And just had a blast there at the track. Nice, clean grudge racing for trophies. Modified the car, got it into the low 13-second bracket, 105 miles an hour, which was good for an automatic. Did that till they closed the track, about 1973 or so. And I was like a lost sheep, didn't know what to do with myself. So tried street racing. That wasn't a very safe habit. And got into road racing through the Porsche Owners Club in 1975 after I sold the Camaro and bought my first Porsche.
Tell me about how street racing was in the 70s.
The street racing scene in the late 60s, early 70s in LA was pretty wholesome. We'd meet up at some dedicated places. There was a group called the Los Angeles Brotherhood of Street Racers. I was part of that. We'd meet up at Stalker and Crenshaw at about midnight on Fridays and Saturdays. And then we go out and find a place like a big straightaway like near LAX, Century Boulevard, Imperial, those places. Big Willie Robinson brought a Christmas tree. He had it in the trunk of his Dodge Racer, and he just put it out, and you'd hit the 2 amber lights and the green, and off you went. There was no hand starting like you see on some of these over-adrenalized TV shows. The Big Willie had the real McCoy Christmas tree in his car. We'd race for money, never more than $100. It started getting crazy. I'd say 74, 75 people with bigger bets. Some other cultures came in with drugs and alcohol and crime and people getting robbed for their money. So the whole thing was pretty much disbanded. Big Willie Robinson somehow convinced the Los Angeles City Council to open up a race track on Terminal Island, which is right out of San Pedro Harbor. It's where the penitentiary is. There's a jail there. There's a police training track for the LAPD. He was able to convince LA City Council to put a drag strip there, which he did. And I give him a lot of kudos. He's passed on. His wife has passed on since then. But the track went in place, and we were all off the street again. And here I am, drag racing on this little. I don't think it was a quarter mile. I think it was one of the first 1/8 mile tracks or so. It was a quarter mile if you didn't shut down fast enough. You're in the ocean. So basically, I decided to look into road racing because it looked like a lot of fun. And I still had the Camaro. I dropped the suspension. I put some different springs in it, some different shocks. And to my liking, I took it around Mulholland, Laurel Canyon, Coldwater. And I liked it. It felt good, but it just felt like it was understeering so hard I wouldn't know what to do in the case of putting input on the steering wheel, not getting around a turn. So I couldn't drift it. The back wouldn't slide out, and I finally put it into a concrete curb and had it fixed. The insurance didn't do such a good job. I put it up for sale, and away went my Detroit iron. That was it. Finished with the Camaro. So and got into the friend's 911, drove it around a little bit, felt really nice. He owned a record store in Melrose, and he also had his father, who owned a body shop, putting together a 914 for him. It was a wreck, but they basically found enough parts to put it back on its feet. He said, take this out for a ride. It's a little different. Took the car out on the canyon, loved it, brought it back, and that weekend I went and bought a 914 at downtown downtown Porsche Audi. Which is still there, a different street though, but got a good deal on it. Took that home, started modifying that, and that satisfied my road racing needs, but then I needed to find a safe place to do that. I hooked up with the Porsche Owners Club in 1975.
I get how you use the Camaro for drag racing, but how did you use it in the canyons?
The reason I took the car into the canyons, I was following a team of Trans Am racers, and it was the Penske team. It was Roger Penske's Trans Am team, and they had a blue Camaro. I believe it was a 67. One of the pilots was Mark Donahue, and there were other teams in the Trans Am. There were the Fords, and they had their own drivers there that are still with us today. Mark is unfortunately not with us, but they took the Camaro. They figured out the suspension. They dropped it. They caged the car. They dipped the cars to make them light. There was an engine builder in Culver City on Jefferson Boulevard named Traco, and Traco built all of these 302 cubic inch Trans Am spec engines. All of the Fords, Plymouths, Dodges, and Chevys, and I think even an American Motors, a Matador or something like that, was running the Trans Am series. They were all 302. That was the formula, 302 cubic inches. I kind of wandered over to Traco on Jefferson because they weren't too far from where I was hanging out with some guys that were building headers for Hedman Header Company, which was also in Culver City. I met some people there that would give me little scrap bends and scrap tubes, and I'd go to my garage in my mom and dad's apartment building and cobble together little bits and pieces of how I think exhaust systems should look and how they should work. And of course, I test them at Lions on Sundays. So at Traco, I got friendly with a couple of the engineers there, and they, what do you want, kid? We build engines for Roger Penske. What do you want here? I said, well, do you mind if I stand around and watch you dyno an engine? Because they had a live engine dyno there. And I said, sure, just put your earmuffs on. So, which I didn't because I like to hear the big roar. And I said, are there any parts here that you could sell me that I could put on this, what do you need? And I told them I needed some shims to go for thinner head gaskets so I could bump the compression up. I wanted some push rod guide plates for the push rods that would always wander around and break rocker arms. I wanted all these little things to get more durability out of the engine. And I told them what my gearing was and what I shifted at. It was a 3-speed automatic, but you still shift it. And they kind of helped me out. They helped me out with parts, and the bill wasn't too bad. They basically sold me stuff they would throw away, but still usable. And I would do all the work in the carport area of my mom and dad's apartment building. And the basic Camaro that I bought in 1969 that went went down the quarter mile the first time at 16.40 seconds at about 92 miles an hour. And by the time I was finished modifying it over the years, it was going about 13.2 at 105.
That doesn't sound like a lot, but in drag racing, 3 seconds is huge.
That's about 30 car lengths. And they classed me in a American Hot Rod Association classification where I'd have to race basically power to weight cars with automatics. So I always had to race this guy named Harrell. He was a nice character from the hood, and he had a 69 El Camino with a 427 Rat engine in it with 3.2 barrels, and he would just smoke me galore. And he'd always wave at me at the end of the quarter mile with pull the window down and goes, "I'm listening to the radio and I got my air conditioning on. Where were you?" And I said, "Well, we've only got 350 cubic inches. You're running like 12 and a half second, 119 mile an hour quarter miles with your radio on and your air on. And I'm just busting my ass to get down at 13.2. But whenever we'd run for trophy runs, this is where the car was really great. We would run for trophy runs at the end of the day, and we'd line up. And probably all the trophies I have in my office today, thanks to Harrell, is at the light, he'd throw a fan belt. At the light, he'd have a flat tire. At the light, his water pump would fail. I'd always finish, and because he couldn't run as fast to his potential, I would trophy. So that made me feel good. It doesn't matter how you get there first to the checkered flag, right? It was the most amazing thing, and I'd get there lined up and stuff and have my tires warmed up, and I am just looking over at him, and he's reaching on the radio dial, putting on K-Day or something on the AM radio, and he's going, "Got the radio on, let's go," right? And I look back in my mirror, he's sitting at the line, basically just limping off with a water pump failure or something.
Bring us back to before the drag racing, before the road racing. Where did it all start?
Well, we'll go into finishing up middle school, which we called junior high back then. And we had shops there. So we had metal shops, wood shops, drafting, print shops. So we learned hand skills, and creativity and stuff. If you pay attention, you could learn a good craft. And going forward into high school, we all wanted to get into the auto shop. My little circle of friends wanted to get into the auto shop. And we were prohibited of getting in the 10th grade because it was an 11th and 12th grade elective. So we couldn't get in right away. When we got our license, we couldn't get into the auto shop. But we all cut corners and hung out with the teacher, who was a superb instructor. We became lifelong friends. He recently passed. And he said, "Don't worry, I got you. When you're 11th grade, you're in here." So my little circle of friends, we all got in, and we all had our specialties. Myself, I was rebuilding carburetors, setting camshafts, learning ratios of rockers and how push rods would fail. These were all non-overhead cam engines because the only cars that had those were Ferraris, Lamborghinis, or Porsches. We dealt with 30% more moving parts, which were creating a lot of extra heat, a lot of extra friction. You couldn't take them to a high red line. So we had to figure out what's causing these things not to go as good as a fine-tuned European car. So some of my friends specialized in stereos and wiring and things like that. Some guys were doing transmissions and rear ends. The teacher taught us everything. And of what we already had hand-skilled crafts that we developed in other shops, but we had the knack to learn how to tweak our cars. And, on the weekends, on Saturdays, when we weren't at the track, we would wash our cars, wax them, go cruise Van Nuys, stuff like that, and set up street races. But we go to Lions Drag Strip on Sunday. We'd set the race up in Van Nuys on the boulevard or at Bob's Big Boy, and go out and do our grudge racing at the track, where it was safe and clean and fun. But myself, I took a knack to electronics, setting up engines. There was no fuel injection to speak of back in high school, but it was coming. Some fun we had in school was, getting through like overhauling carburetors. Like in the first year, probably 200 parts to a 4-barrel carburetor if you take it down to the last spring. So one of the characters in the class went over to the auto parts store and just bought an overhauled carburetor and turned it in for a grade. And he was sent to detention hall for a couple of days couldn't pull that over the teacher. So, me, had hands full in the carburetor cleaner solvent and, skin peeling off at the end of the day and getting it done the right way. So, yeah, I basically took the skills that I had and turned it into the modifying for hot rodding, and that was part of getting the car to go the 3 seconds quicker in the quarter mile. Quarter mile's only 1,320 feet. A 7,000 horsepower nitro burning funny car will do it today in about 3 seconds and change. But you're talking about a street driven car at 13, 12, 11 seconds. That's darn fast. 11 seconds back in high school days would have been a very fast motorcycle.
That's still really fast today.
It is true. But you can go buy a Hellcat today if you had the ways and means, and you just take an 11-second car to the drag strip, period. You don't build it, you just put gas in it. So the high school thing was great. When high school was over and I had some time, the teacher asked me to come in, to help him in his night classes. So I went in and did volunteer work, getting people familiar with oil changes and filters and tire rotation and air pressures. So like I said, we became really good lifelong friends, and a bunch of us did up till his days when he became terminal and finally passed. We would still get together and take him out for lunch like every 3 months, and in the West Side, and he'd make every one of us stand up and kind of like tell because these are all guys graduating at different times. We didn't really know a lot of people from different grades, but just kind of a show and tell. Hey, what do you do today? What's your name? What year did you graduate? And all of us are basically in some form of the automotive industry. The last year of high school, there was a program for auto shop highly excelling students called Automotive Industrial Occupations. And it was a 2-hour class instead of a 1-hour class. So me and about a dozen of my homeboys got into there, and we just learned as much as we could for the last year in high school. And fast forward to when I met Michael at one of his student teacher parent nights at Palisades High. Palisades High did reintroduce their auto shop several years ago. It's running very strong, and the group of friends that were close to Michael, basically on an email chain now, we're going to be picking up a lot of automotive shop tools and donating them to Pacific Palisades Auto Shop in the name of Michael Peel. So that's happening currently.
It's really sad to see all the trade education go away. There's very little wood shop. There's very little auto shop.
Well, like the thing they have with take your son to work day, take your daughter to work. But now there's a reversal where it's like the kid take your parent to work day. So a lot of these parents that of my group right now are going to work with their kids, and they're seeing them with all these IT things going on and whatever they have to do in the world of everything traveling at the speed of internet and everything. But nobody's building anything. It's absent. Nobody's taking their parents to a factory or to an assembly or a think tank or anything. Everything is just happening at a keyboard. When I came through schools, hey, I don't want to learn how to be a plumber. I don't want to be a electrician. There's yellow pages for that. Just go to the yellow pages. Call somebody, right? Now, what's going to happen when all those people are no longer craftsmen? They're not teaching it. In Europe, you have like in Germany, you have the Fachschule, which is a trade school, and you learn a trade before they put you out on your own, and you have a way to make a living, and you have something to do that you like, So I've never seen, in movies I see of the Porsche factory where they're assembling the cars, I've never seen an unhappy person working on a Porsche. Maybe there are a few, but they don't show them on the film, so everybody's happy building those cars.
If I remember correctly, you didn't go directly into the auto industry, right?
Well, basically, coming out of the hobby, you can't make money with a hobby. It's just a happy, soul-fulfilling trip down life. But taking your hobby and turning it into an avocation and then into a career, it basically was after high school, I did a little stint with some 2-year colleges. I did a 2-year education in tool manufacturing here at LA Valley College, which was very helpful because in order to build things, you need tools, but it would be nice to see how tools are made. So I took the tool manufacturing. Don't know if it's a curriculum that's still available, but it was great. And then I took a little time off and I worked for a major line insurance company, Prudential, for a couple of years. And I realized in 40 years, I didn't want to wake up and be sitting at a desk with a tie on and wearing a suit. So I went into the life insurance, annuities, group health. I went and pounded the pavement for Prudential in my 914. I would drive around and meet people and have appointments, and that I liked. I liked the people part, not sitting at a desk all day. So that went a little further, and then I wanted to take a little time off and travel Europe, and I put my leave of absence in with Prudential, and they immediately terminated me, and I went to Europe. So in Europe, I did the $1 a day on a backpack for about a year, and I was putting together a plan for myself when I'd get back, a bunch of people to get back in touch with, but not so much on the Detroit iron scene, but on the European scene. I had my 914 already. It was stashed away in a garage for a year on jacks. I knew it would be there when I got back. Came back and basically wanted to get that little 90 horsepower car faster around the track. So I started tinkering with this new thing called turbocharging. And I met a few people that said, should work. Why wouldn't it work? The engine's got 4 cycles, it'll do exactly what it does just with forced induction. And then I met about, for everyone that said it would work, I met 10 that said the engine will melt down. You'll never see it go more than a month in use. Everything will break. And I did away with those people, and I stayed with the people that would help me create it. So I met various people, again, that I already had some connections with before, and basically got some things mandrel bent up for me, found some people that would machine some flanges for me. I met this guy named Ack Miller, who was an old racer from the 50s. He did the Pan America Carrera. He had a few records with that. And Ack Miller was the sales outlet for Garrett Air Research turbochargers, Ray J turbochargers. And we sat down and figured out what this 120 cubic inch engine needed. It was a 2-liter. And basically, we flowed the turbos. He sold me one. I took it back to another friend that was moonlighting in a header shop in Culver City. And he said, come here on Saturdays and Sundays and we'll put it together. Do you have any sketches? I said, yes, they're all sketched here. I did those all in Europe when I was traveling. And we bent it up and built it up. And within 30 days, I had a running Type 4 914 4-cylinder 2-liter running on the streets of LA, turbocharged flawlessly. No problems, no heating problems. Non-intercooled, though. Ran a tank of alcohol injection to keep the detonation down, which is kind of primitive because there were no intercoolers yet. But today, I think a lot of guys are running intercoolers, either water to air or air to air, and they're spraying meth in the engines too. So we were basically spraying methanol alcohol into the injection. And I say we because I still had a couple of pals that were helping me on the project. It was in Hollywood. One afternoon, I called a friend over named Dave, and if he's listening, he'll know who he is. And we hopped in the car together. I'm driving. He's sitting shotgun, and we're going up some empty streets. And he goes, "This thing sounds a little different." I said, "It does. It's a little quieter, actually, but it does pick up a nice song when you get into it." And he goes, "Let's find a nice stretch. Let's get into it." So we basically found a nice stretch, empty boulevard. I think it was Fairfax Avenue going north of Melrose up to Sunset. So a little uphill, which is good for a turbo. You get a little load on the turbo. It'll spool fast. And we're going second, third, fourth. And he goes, "Do you have the brakes to slow this thing down? Or are they still stock?" I said, "They're stock." He said, "Start scrubbing your speed now." So we started slowing down, and he goes, "This thing flat out gets it." And I said, "You remember the old days?" I said, "Yeah, this thing wouldn't get out of its own way." So he goes, let's find a bigger road. So we took it out to like Palm Springs on the desert roads and stuff and just opened it up. And we didn't really increase the top speed of the car, but we'd get there a whole lot faster. it would do 120 in a heartbeat and use up all of fifth gear. So he said he was a big Carmen Ghia and a bug guy. He was already putting 912 engines and bugs in Carmen Ghias back in the 70s. And this was 1975 or so when I did the first turbo. And he said, I've read a lot about a lot of fast Volkswagens, a lot of fast Carmen Ghias. This thing should be in a magazine. So I said, okay. And he goes, here's a guy's name. This is the magazine. Call him and show him the car. So I did. And it was Argus Publishing. It was called Volkswagen Greats before it was even known as Volkswagen and Porsche, which morphed into European Car, which is now not in paper anymore, but it's online. So I drove over to Wilshire. I had an appointment with the gentleman, with the editor, and took him for a ride down Veteran by the Veterans Cemetery. And I think he coined the phrase later in a magazine. He said, if you know Marty Schneider, never take a ride with him on Veteran. But didn't hurt anybody. But got the car in the magazine, and people started ordering turbo kits, and I wasn't even in business. So I was sitting on like probably $70,000 of orders and cashier's checks, and I was about to mail them all back. And then reality kicked in, and I said, hey, this avocation just turned into a career. I should make the best of it. So I had to go out and find people that would assemble parts for me, and I did that for quite a few years until I realized I couldn't control the quality control. So I had to do it, dedicate a shop. And we started out just doing turbo kits. And they were do-it-yourself kits, paid the instructions, everything, wiring schematic for the enrichment system that you needed for the proper operation to keep from burning the pistons out. Everything boxed up, shipped out. I believe it was about $750 for a whole kit. Today, that wouldn't even buy you one turbo. Just going forward, the turbo kits ran from the 914, and we started doing 911 turbo kits, and there was some competition coming in, and then we started doing kits for like diesel Volkswagens like Jettas and Scirocco's and the pickup trucks, and it was paying the bills. But the problem was I needed to be in the shop daily for 14 hours to work with the guys I hired to weld and to fabricate and to do the finishing. They could not put a kit together and put it in a box without me being there. They just couldn't understand the engineering aspect. So it was very labor intensive. The price point wasn't there enough really to hire more people and train them. I'd have to start giving the stuff away, trading dollars, whatever. So I just started getting into assembling mandrel bent tuned exhaust headers in the same shop that I set up to do the kits. I could actually do the headers and the CAD backs and all that stuff, and went forward with that. Shop got too small, moved to South El Monte, had the shop there for about 12, 14 years, and then finally to Glendale, where we are today. So it's a full in-house, from design to part in the box kind of company now. The first set of exhaust headers I ever installed in my life was in high school auto shop on a Hemi 426 Hemi powered, I believe it was a Plymouth Roadrunner. And the guy brought in a set of hooker headers and came with instructions and all that stuff. And the teacher, Mike, came over and said, okay, everybody, we're going to watch Marty and Wayne and Dave put these headers in on this Roadrunner. And but they don't know what's coming, right? And I didn't know what was coming either. I figure you remove and replace, right? So the teacher grabs a big 2x4, a small 4x4, and a sledgehammer. And I go, what's all this? And he goes, you're going to need that to put headers in. And I said, no, I won't. It says right here in the instructions what I need. And he said, did they tell you about changing spark plugs? That's going to be a hassle too with headers and all that stuff. I said, no, it doesn't say nothing about that. So a week later, we had the 2-hour installation done. And we did use the 2x4. We did use the 4x4. And there are some sledgehammer marks on the headers. So taking that forward to when I started my own assembly factory to do tuned mandrel bent exhaust manifold and headers, I never wanted to have somebody out there in New York or Chicago or Florida laying on the ground putting in some headers and cursing at me. They had to fit, they had to be right, they had to be tested on an engine block before they left my shop. And they have to fit the assembly jigs 100%. I check like every other one that's made. My name's on the box. I want it right. I don't plan obsolescence into my products. So, when somebody calls me after 30 years, like a dentist in Ottawa, Canada, will say, my 930, the right side header's got a big dent in it. I said, did you get on some black ice and maybe put it into the guardrail ass end first? And he goes, that did happen. I said, okay, is it still working? Yes, but not good. I said, I'll send you another right side, no problem. Keep that one for a paperweight. It's just like the stuff I try to make and not plan an obsolescence into it. Kind of like Craftsman tools, you're warranted for life. Wear and tear, I mean, let's face it, the exhaust system runs in one of the most volatile areas of the car. It runs under severe heat, severe chemicals in the fuel that's going through it, and the temperatures. I mean, really? You're not going to guarantee it for life? I says, no. I says, what does Porsche guarantee anything they sell you for your car at the dealer? It's 6 months or 6,000 miles. It's 12 months or 12,000 miles. If it's electric, it's walk out the door, the warranty's over. I said, my guarantee is a lot better than Porsche. And I said, read the media, get some ideas from people that have my products. You have the right to open the box. You don't like it, send it back, full refund. I don't encounter that very often.
Talk to me about the 914 chassis. It's not really the beloved Porsche chassis.
Well, the 914 format was hatched. I don't want to get into the history on that, between the Porsche Corporation and the Volkswagen Corporation. There were two friends that hatched it in late 1969, and the first car actually arrived at the Geneva Auto Show in 1969 also. But body's built by Karmann, which is a body maker in Germany.
They also made 356s, right?
They were made there. Some of them, they were made at 3 different body manufacturers in Germany, actually, but Karmann was one. The 914-6, which actually had a little bit better suspension, the 5-lug wheels, and the 911T engine put into it. It actually left the Karmann factory and went to Stuttgart-Zuffenhausen to get assembled in the Porsche factory. To be finished, the 914 4-cylinders stayed at Volkswagen for assembly. Because basically the Type 4 engine was just a hot-rodded 412 Volkswagen engine, which became known as the Type 4 Volkswagen Porsche engine. But the bodies, the 911 bodies, the 914 bodies of the day were all built and sent out for painting and assembly, and none of them were galvanized or rust-prevented in any way, even the early 911s. Your family being in that business, you'd know that water is the worst thing for a non-rust-proofed car. And, 914s just basically, a lot of them went into the dirt and into the salvage yards because nobody wanted to maintain them or fix them or take them apart and do a full rotisserie restoration on them back in those days. Some of the GTs with history today, the 914-6 GTs or the M471 package, they're going for $300,000 and up. There's one that's going to be at a very prestigious auction in February next year. It'll be one of the 916 prototypes. I think the prototype of the prototype 916s will be going, and it belonged to Ferdinand Porsche's sister. That's going to go for a big clip. But as far as the chassis go, like the car that Matt and I are coming to full fruition on building, the 914-8 GTT, that car was totally stripped down to the metal. All the seam welded and spot welds were all fully welded, so the unibody is now fully encapsulated, and all the little joints and all the little sheet metal pieces are all welded together, and then tastefully sanded a little bit to get it to look really nice. Then it was primed and painted. Maybe if they took that step, the car would be a little more survivors today and stuff like that. But between 911 and 914, now I own a 930 Turbo as well, and both cars, one being mid, one being rear, they'll both serve you up pretty good if you throttle lift in a turn. So it really doesn't matter about the mid-engine placement or not. It's just a matter of milliseconds of reaction and how you drive the car. And you should never lift a car that's tail happy. You should never lift that car on throttle because you'll see the guardrail fast. Basically, the cars are both torsion bar front suspension. Until the later 911s, they're coilovers in the front. The 914s were trailing arms. The 911s were trailing arms in the rear. The 911s were trailing arm with torsion bars, and the 914s are rear trailing arms with coil springs. So, there's a little improvement there. But, trailing arm cars are not full A-arms rear suspension. Let's say you mentioned the Dino earlier. The Dino has the nice A-arm suspension in the back like a Ferrari should. But all the Porsches since the days of the, I'd say the C2, C4, the 993, they started coming out with that Weissach rear suspension, which basically is really nice and more forgiving. This is even before they put the nannies in it, the controls. But between cars, 911s, 914s, Porsche didn't want to do nothing with the 914 after 76 model year, and they just ditched it. Whatever engines they had left over went into a 911 called the 912E, which used to be on Craigslist for pennies. Now those are $30,000 cars or more. So because of rare numbers, they did not make a lot. The cars that you see today, the 986 Boxster, the 718, I guess it's still a Boxster, but they call it something else, a 718, the Cayman, the Cayman GT4s, they're all variants of mid-engine Porsches. And the mid-engine Porsches basically put Porsche on the map in the racing days and the competition cars. And of course, the purists, I don't know if they're happy or not, the RSR that runs the WeatherTech series now, they're all mid-engines too.
Marty, share the story of how you began racing the Porsche and also how you got involved with the Porsche Club.
I was working part-time right out of graphics school. When I finished that program, I took a part-time job at an independent Porsche repair shop in Mar Vista, which is basically the west end of Culver City. And, solvent tank boy, clean the valve covers, sweep the floor, feed the dog. And I met a lot of guys there that were all into this Porsche scene with the club racing. And they were just saying, you got to get into this club. You have to do this. You have to go here. You have to go to this meeting and sign up. You have to do this. I said, okay. So we went, and it was in downtown LA somewhere at a hotel. They rented a room, and they had, buffet and everything. And they showed some pictures of some slalom racing. And they did show some time trialing, heavy duty time trialing, which in those days we used Ontario Motor Speedway. We used Riverside International Raceway, and of course, Willow Springs. And some of this stuff looked pretty scary, looking at the films that these guys are showing. And I said, that's kind of fast, So that's what it is. You have the guys that teach you the course, and now it's even more proficient. In those days, they just take you out and they figured you're good. Go get your long sleeve shirt, your jeans, and your sneakers, and go for it. You got your fire extinguisher, you're okay. And but I signed up for the club in 1975, and Matthew actually joined up when he was 6 months shy of getting his driver's license, but we signed him up in the club with the learner's permit. That was good enough for him to get his competition status with the Porsche Owners Club, and then he had to just start taking the classes. But the guys that I met, they're all mostly still in business today. They all own their own independent repair shops. They're all scattered around Southern California. They're the greatest group I've ever met. Some of these guys today, they support IMSA racing. They'll do the arrive and drive for you. They have 18-wheelers. They'll put your race car in their shop. They'll set it up for the track you're going to go to. They'll tow you to Daytona, Watkins Glen, or over here local Chuckwalla or Spring Mountain in Nevada. They'll put you in the 18-wheeler. You get there, you just show up, put on your suit, start the car, warm it, and go take it out. And this is all at club level or even professional WeatherTech like IMSA racing and stuff. And these guys have come a long way, and we're still arm's length reach from them, and they think we're pretty nuts too for building this car.
In part 2 of this episode, we'll hear from Marty's son, Matt. We dive deep into how the father and son team came up with the idea to build a Cayenne-powered 1,000 plus horsepower 914. You don't want to miss it. The Road Stories podcast is recorded and edited by me, Michael Senderovich. Music in this episode is provided by Clarence and the Road Stories Project. And if you like the show, please write us a review wherever you listen. It helps the show greatly. And lastly, make sure to follow me on social media at Road Stories Mike for exclusive content. Thanks so much for listening.